Okay, welcome back to the Hortman Show. My name's Steve Allgeier. I'm with Carroll County Extension, or University of Maryland, Carroll County. And we're going to bring basically what came across my desk this week to you. It's been a great summer. Some people love it, some people hate it. It all depends on what you're looking for. This year, it's been rain and relatively cool weather. We're moving into August, and of course the year keeps unfolding. The big thing that I've gotten within the last couple weeks are people are looking at their tomatoes and looking at their tomatoes, and everybody seems to have a tomato, at least one tomato plant in their backyard, and they're getting big and bushy because of all the rain, but the fruits aren't ripening. It's really just a function of weather at this point. Lots of rain, overcast weather, and cooler temperatures have led to kind of a delay in the crop. So you're just going to have to sit on your hands and wait for warm weather and lots of sun, and that will help the ripening process. It'll happen, and I'm quite sure a lot of people are already reporting some pretty good tomatoes, but it's just the weather. Sorry, I can't help you on that. The other problem that came up, and I've seen it quite a bit recently, this ugly thing right here is vestiges or remainders of lavender. Lavender is a great, reliable plant if you have it in the sun. It's really kind of, they throw it into a category called a subshrub. It's a woody plant, and to keep lavender healthy, I tell people it's great to cut back those woody portions. This part of the plant, when it gets thick, will lead the plant to kind of spread out and form this large open center. And I've seen times where these main branches have gotten so big that they'll actually split the center of the plant, and I think that causes a rot in the center. This year's an exception. This is a relatively small branch, and the plants that this person had in their bed were in the right spot. They were in a nice sunny spot. The problem was that they've rotted out, and again, it's a lot of moisture. So ideally with lavender, if you have a situation where you think the soil's a little bit too moisture retentive, you'll want to raise those beds up. You can build formal raised beds. I'll leave it up to you how you want to construct it. But even just mounding the soil up and elevating it will help with the drainage. But this is a tough one this year. They can take the cold, they can take the heat and the dryness, but some of the times they'll just start to rot out and die if they get too much moisture, and this year they're getting it, too much moisture. Great question came in, and I've been meaning to talk about this. I got this bag full of stuff on my desk. I was out earlier this week, and the question was, what can I eat? Now, obviously, you don't want to forage for all your food, and this person found a bunch of berries growing wild around their yard and in the woods near them, and of course they look delicious. They're bright and shiny and all that stuff, but some things are poisonous, some things aren't. This is a blackberry, which is native in our area. It's one of the last bramble type berries, and a bramble typically is a thorny, it's hard to see it on this one, but if we had a bigger stem section, you'll see larger thorns. Blackberries have very stout thorns. I call them gene rippers. They're pretty tough when it comes to bramble type thorns, but in either case, these plants that have these drooplets, these faceted fruits, raspberries, blackberries, wineberries, one of my favorites, it's actually a weed, and mulberries all have a very similar fruit, and they're all edible. It's interesting because he has a bittersweet nightshade here, which is considered poisonous. The thing I find interesting about it is this plant is in the Solanaceous family, and there are other edible plants, or at least plants where we get edible fruits off of in that family, such as tomatoes and peppers and potatoes. Really, we aren't reading the tuber on a tomato, but you've probably heard warnings when you eat a potato that the fruit can be, or that tuber, if you have a green eye, can be poisonous. It'll give people an upset stomach if they eat that green portion. So they always say to cut out the green eyes. So the important thing, I think, is in general, these faceted fruits with drooplets that look like this, most of them, if not all of them, in our area are edible. Now, there's still precautions. There's still things such as poison ivy and ticks that are out there. And also, if you suspect this fruit has been sprayed, maybe with an herbicide or some insecticide, you don't want to be eating that. So know your plants. There's plenty of good resources. Actually, you can contact me at hortman.umd.edu. That's my email address. You can send me pictures. I'm getting lots of pictures. Or you can give me a call at 410-386-2776. Feel free to bring in a sample like this person did, because you don't want to start eating something that could potentially be lethal or dangerous. This plant, one year I made a mistake. I was showing somebody these blueberry bushes, and they were covered with blueberries, and I just reached in, grabbed a handful of these berries, and within the blueberries was some of this, and I started chewing on the blueberries, and right away I knew I was in trouble. Didn't poison myself. These taste god-awful bitter. They're very, very strong, and many of the toxic berries tend to have alkaloids in them, and I can't see how anybody could eat enough of this stuff to really poison themselves because they are so strong, but you don't know. Some people can eat anything. Let's see, kind of catch of the week. Really, this should be catch of the summer. This is let me get this stuff out of the way. This is off a shrub called an Abelia, and it's, to me, an old-fashioned shrub that I see in a lot of older landscapes around Carroll County and Baltimore, wherever. If you're in an older community, a lot of times I find these Abelias, and people are constantly asking me, hey, I want a shrub that doesn't require a whole lot of care and blooms a long time. And you kind of roll your eyes and think, oh boy, they want a plastic plant. But what's nice about Abelia, unlike a rose, it doesn't have large showy blooms, but this will start blooming some of the times in May, and I've seen it keep blooming on into September. It has a relatively good habit in that it gets about 3 to 6 foot tall, maybe just as wide. It can take some shearing. You can cut it kind of whenever. You don't have to worry about cutting off the blooms for next year. It resets blooms on all the new wood that comes on. And the thing I like also is it's almost evergreen depending on the winter. And some winters I've seen this nice, you can see it has a lustrous kind of dark green leaf. It's covered pretty uniformly all the way down, and this leaf will bronze up in the winter. Last winter and the winter before, 2014 and 2013, they were pretty tough, and they dropped all their leaves. But it has an evergreen type effect. Most winters it won't hold on to the leaves all summer. It's not terribly demanding when it comes to the type of soil it needs either. As long as it has average moisture, it will do well. And this does pretty well in part sun. So you don't have to have full sun on it, but like many shrubs, if you have part sun on it, you tend to get less bloom. But it's really good as a landscape shrub. The thing that I think is important if you're worried about getting a good match for your landscape is do your research. And too often we walk into the nursery in the spring and we fall in love with whatever's in bloom, we drag it home. And some of these nurseries tend to stock stuff that's probably good up and down the East Coast. And some of the times they have stuff that may be better in the South and it isn't reliable up north. And that's where I tell people, start doing your research. There's some great information out there. I hate to hold up a thick book like this, but this is really the standard when it comes to landscape plants. It's the Manual of Woody Landscape Plants by Michael Durr. And a lot of times you'll hear people just say, oh, do you have the Durr book? It's pretty well recognized as the go-to, or the Bible, as a lot of people call it, for woody plant information. It's not terribly sexy. It's filled with print, and it's kind of academic, and it really is meant for classrooms. It's meant for industry people, but I find it's pretty accessible. Most laymen that'll pick it up will be able to open it up and say, oh yeah, they have a section on culture, and it'll, in very plain speak, talk about, hey, what this plant needs, what are its drawbacks, and then it'll talk about the diseases. And the nice part is it will also talk about the various cultivars. And cultivars, probably is a cultivar. I'm not real sure which one it is, but these are varieties that are selected and maintained by the nursery industry primarily because they have a certain attribute. They bloom a lot, they have interesting foliage, they're reliable, whatever. And this will give you the inside scoop because unfortunately there are Abelias out there, there are varieties of Abelias that aren't as reliable, especially hardiness-wise in our area. So if you get an Abelia and you want one that's a surefire plant, look for one that's Abelia grandiflora. There are some hybrids now that mix some Chinese Abelias with this grandiflora type, and they have some hardiness, but they aren't as reliably hardy. And I saw a couple this past winter where it really got cold and they died back to the ground. They're coming back, but again, if you want something that doesn't die back, then stick with Abelia grandiflora. There's plenty of selections for that. If you want, please follow me on YouTube, and you can also check us out on social media. Again, any questions, feel free to call me or send me an email to if you want to follow us, no.
I know it's always confusing.
It always confuses me. I'm quite sure not many people have this roadblock. I can do that one over again. Well, yeah. If you want to subscribe, click below. If you want to follow us on Facebook or ask a question, click above. Got there. You know what, one day I'll write it out, I'll study it. I have to take all these certifications, so I'll do that one when I'm doing my, I don't know, municipal arborist certification or something sexy like that. I gotta memorize this stuff.